Chris,
Hey,
can you hear me?
I can hear you and I can see your beautiful background as well.
Oh, well, do you see this? Speaking of beautiful?
I do.
Yes. I might have mentioned to you that whenever we do a Q&A event via Zoom, I like to bring her out front to make the readers feel at ease, as though they are autistic children or something. But,
It's a very relaxing face that she's got.
That's because she's drunk. Welcome. I don't think we're expecting anyone from the BNN team to join us. Right? It's just.
I don't think so. No, I think it's just us talking. What could possibly go wrong?
Well, first off, let me introduce you. Let me introduce myself. I'm most important here. There we go. My name is AJ Finn. I am the author of The Woman in the Window, soon to be a major Netflix film next month. And it is my pleasure today to introduce Chris Whitaker, who is the author of 3 books, the most recent of which, We Begin at the End, is an instant classic. As I said, that was me. Yeah, that's the one. This book is I think it reminds me most of Where the Crawdads Sing and To Kill a Mockingbird. And although both those books are iconic, you actually don't find many titles that warrant immediate comparison with them because their alchemy is so specific. This book radiates that same magic. So, Chris Whitaker, is there anything else I should say about you by way of introduction before you tell us how you came to write this book?
I think you've covered the important things and shown a copy of the book. So you've done that was our job, wasn't it? We have to show the book, introduce ourselves. Yeah, you've done well.
Would you please tell us how you came to write We Begin at the End? Where you had been before, what was the inspiration, etc.?
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you a variation of there's kind of a letter at the back of the book, which people might have read if they bought the book from Barnes and Noble. Otherwise, they won't kind of know. But I had a really strange journey into writing. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was at school. Did you, out of interest? I like to ask people, did you know where you were headed?
I did. I read English, so I knew I was headed to a low-paying job. That was.
So you were much like my friends at the time. They knew kind of what they wanted to do, where they wanted to be in 5 years, and I just had no idea at all. Nothing. I wasn't very academic, so nothing grabbed me, because I think you tend to enjoy the things that you're good at, and
yes.
I couldn't find anything I was really good at back then. So I went out the night before my economics exam and got very drunk and woke up in hospital and missed the exam. So missed my chance to go to university. I mean, I could have resat the exam, but nothing appealed. I wanted to go out and make some money. Yes. And I bounced from job to job, and I worked in a bakery, which I loved. I sold electrical cabling, which I did not love. Right. I did some bar work, which I really loved. I still miss that now. Just propping the bar up and talking to people. Perfect job. And then I was working as a real estate agent. And I was out in London, North London, quite early one morning. I was dropping leaflets through people's doors, and someone came up to me and asked to borrow my phone. Being a Londoner, I knew that I was going to get mugged because I know how it goes. Because it's happened to me, happened to many of my friends. But I was 19, and kind of that fearless teenage thing that sometimes you have going on. I had that going on, and he wasn't very big, and I thought I'm gonna fight, I'm gonna try my luck and gonna fight him off. And I was holding my own, and then he pulled out a kitchen knife, and it was the kind of knife that I remember looking at it thinking, this must be for show, because people don't carry a knife like that. It was really kind of startling. And then he stabbed me in the side a few times, but I didn't realize, I thought he was punching me because the adrenaline was going, so I didn't really feel anything. And then I looked down and I saw my shirt covered in blood, and I dropped my phone and my wallet, and he picked them up and ran off. And I jumped in my car, which was quite near, the road I was on was quite near to the hospital. Mm-hmm. And I drove myself there, and I was kind of in a bad way. I was kind of clutching my side, and when you start to black out and you start seeing stars, and I just got to that point as I got into the car park. And then I went inside and they stitched me back together, and I walked away from there with just some scars that I still have now. but I still make up things to my children because I don't want to tell them the real story. So I say I was bitten by a shark, things like that. I will tell them one day, or they'll see something like this and then work it out. And but then everything started going wrong. I didn't know about PTSD. I didn't know why I was feeling so bad. I didn't know why I couldn't sleep, why I couldn't read a book, why I couldn't watch television or do anything at all. I just kept kind of playing it over and over again in my head. And I didn't tell anyone because I think sometimes it's a difficult thing to talk about, or to admit that you're not okay. And I didn't want to, my brother was kind of, he was brilliant. He went to the London School of Economics. He was kind of had his stuff together, and in a way that made me feel like I didn't want to be the one that needed looking after, you know, in my parents' eyes. So I kept it all quiet and managed to project that I was okay, but I was drinking too much and taking drugs and things like that and doing things I shouldn't have been doing. And that got really bad after a while, and it kind of culminated in me hoarding a load of painkillers, and I sat down and I was going to take them all. And I wrote a note, started to write a note to my parents explaining why I was about to do what I was going to do. And then I'd got a book from the library, and it was kind of a therapy book, and it talks about a technique where you take the traumatic incident, you change the characters involved, change the people involved to fictional characters, you change the location, change the outcome. I think it's like a distraction, or maybe just to take you out of the moment for a while. Mm-hmm. And I wrote Duchess 20 years ago. I had this strong image of this girl that was kind of being bullied and had been written off by life. And that got me through that night, actually. I wrote a scene which made it into the book, which is her mum is being heckled when she plays guitar on stage. Mm-hmm. And Duchess stands up for her. And I just wrote that. And I don't know how it worked, but it got me through that night. And I went to bed and slept for about 5 hours. And that was the longest I'd slept in months and months. And the next day I did it again. You know, I sat down and wrote some more. And the more I wrote, the better I felt. There were still some blips. I drank too much and then drove my car off the side of the road. And it was quite bad. And I still have a scar down my cheek here, which is kind of a constant reminder when I shave every morning. And I remember my mum being very disappointed in me. You know, drink driving, you would be, you know, it's a stupid thing to do, but I was still unable to say what was going on. So I just went back to writing again, and I kept it up until probably a year later, when I felt well enough to decide what I wanted to do next. And I saw an article in the paper about a stockbroker, and there was a picture of him there, and he was there was a yacht in the background, and he had a Ferrari, and I thought, this is what I want. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I thought, I'm going to be a stockbroker. My brother kindly reminded me that I was terrible at maths. That didn't bother me. So I went into the city, and I think a company took pity on me because my CV was so bad, and they gave me a job. And I worked as a broker, which in some way suited me because I still wasn't very good at sleeping, and I'm still not good at sleeping. It's something I've never shaken. And there were a lot of late nights. You know, I'd be working 20-hour days and doing client entertaining. And whilst it was, you know, on the surface, I was quite successful, I was still drinking too much, taking drugs, things like that, doing what was the done thing. But other people seemed better able to cope with it than me. You know, they could switch it on and off, whereas for me, it just became this way of life. And I got called. I wanted to work on a trading desk. It was my dream job. You know, you take the company's money, you invest it, you don't have any clients. You're kind of at the front end. And my boss gave me a chance on the desk, and he said, if you lose $20,000, you stop trading. And we talk about what went wrong. And the next day I lost $2 million. Yeah.
You're an overachiever.
I know, exactly. And my friend worked in the back office. So I said to my friend, let's not tell anyone. I will make it back, which is ridiculous because I wasn't very good. So I lost a bit more money. And then I went into work one day, and everyone was waiting for me in the boardroom. The bosses, solicitors, lawyers, they were there, and there was an empty seat at the end of the table for me. So I sat there, and everything unraveled. And they could have gone to the police, but I had started to make money, and they kindly, and I'm really genuinely grateful, they gave me the option to pay back half of it myself. So I signed a contract there and then, and I remember riding the train home, and I was 24, and I was in $1 million of debt, and I got home, and my fiance at the time, was planning our wedding. And on the surface, I was very successful, you know, and the wedding costs were spiraling, and we were renting a really nice apartment. And I felt the need again to make, you know, to give the perception that everything was fine, you know, which it clearly wasn't. And I'd worked so hard to leave the 19-year-old me behind, and I was right back there again. I was taking drugs again, and just in such a mess, and I just felt like I'd ruined everything. And I went back to doing what I did before. You know, I was we would look at churches in the day, and then I'd be looking at life insurance in the evening, because I didn't want to leave her without anything. And it was Duchess, it was going back to We Begin at the End that got me through it a second time, you know, and I did come close again. You know, it was really, it's hard to put into words how bad it was. And I went back to Montana, wrote this book again. It wasn't a book, it was kind of a series of scenes just about this girl struggling with life. And I projected however I was feeling onto this character. So if I was angry, I made her angry. And I got through it, and I paid the money back eventually. And then I was near 30 when I read a book called The Last Child by John Hart, which I loved. It was, it's absolutely brilliant. Just beautiful story. And then I read an interview with John. Yeah.
I had no idea you would.
Exactly, yeah. That was perfect.
Yep.
So that was like a magic trick.
Ta-da!
Yeah, so I read an interview with John, and he talks about how he gave up a career as a lawyer. He was a successful lawyer to be a writer, and it was so inspiring. The next day I walked into my boss's office and quit my job. Went home to my pregnant wife, who didn't have a job, and said, I'm going to write a book, which was news to her, because as far as she knew, I'd never written anything. So it was just this crazy decision, and I plunged us overnight. You know, we went from being fairly comfortable with a fairly certain future to everything changing. It was like kind of pulling the rug away, and she was brilliant, you know, incredibly supportive. And we sold our apartment, so we had a nice car, sold our car, moved to Spain because the cost of living was less, and we lived by the sea while I wrote Tall Oaks, my debut. And I didn't realize, you know, that you needed an agent and a publishing deal and things like that. You know, I found that out afterwards, because I might not have done it, because the odds, as you know, the odds of even getting an agent, it's difficult. There's so many people submitting constantly, and they take a small percentage. But luckily, a few agents were interested in the book. So we went back to London. I wrote the book. It was nominated for a Dagger, which is like your Edgar Awards. And we went to this award ceremony, and it was there were New York Times bestsellers there, people like, you know, that I wanted to go and get autographs. That's the kind of thing it was. And I didn't write a speech, because I was just there for the free booze. And then they announced Tall Oaks had won, and I went up, made a mess of the speech, got back to the hotel room, and my wife burst out into tears. And it was then it kind of dawned on me, because as writers, we're kind of at the center of things, and sometimes I forget how hard it is for people around me. People along for the ride and the journey with me, and she'd had such a tough time. And then I wrote another book, and then I went back to We Begin at the End, because I had unfinished business. And then John Hart read the book and sent me an email, and was just lovely. And I did an event a couple of weeks ago with John Hart, and I got to tell him this story. So I got to tell John Hart the John Hart story, which was, it felt like coming full circle. And that is my very long answer to your simple question. So and that brings us pretty much up to date.
But I mean, that's pretty standard, isn't it? That happened to me, the scabbing,
exactly.
The drink driving. Yeah. So you're not special.
Exactly.
Point.
Yeah.
Why did you wait until your third go at the typewriter to tell this particular story?
It felt it felt too personal, which sounds funny because it's a book about a 13-year-old girl in Montana, and but it just, you know, even from the style it's written in, because I copied the style that I'd written in 20 years ago. You know, it's quite unemotional. You know, you present these things and let readers make up their own mind how they feel about it. And I needed not to do that. I needed not to go back there. You know, and I think it would have been too much from quitting my job and trying to, it was just such a difficult period in my life. And every time I read any Duchess, or it just took me straight back there. And I remembered exactly where I was when I wrote any given scene. And I needed a break. And it was kind of, you know, I needed a couple of books. And then I had a 2-book deal with my publisher, wrote the 2 books, and then I signed a new 2-book deal. But I kind of had a gap in between. And I thought, you know, every time I logged onto my computer, I saw it there and it felt like unfinished business. And I knew it would be tough. And I remember pitching to my UK editor. I said, oh, it's about a girl that's wearing a Stetson and carrying a gun. And she looked at me like, you know, that you do know that look that editors give.
Well, I've given it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So she gave me that look, and I said I'd deliver it in 6 months. And then 3 years later, she got this terrible first draft. And yeah, and it just didn't feel right until it got to Amy in the US, and it was still a book that I wasn't sure I wanted it to be published, okay. And it just didn't feel like the book that it could be.
Okay.
And then Amy got it, and we went to work on it for a couple of years, and I always want to call her Amazing Amy, but then I remember Gone Girl.
That's Gone Girl. Yeah, don't. Please don't. That's not a compliment.
I loved Amazing Amy as well as Amy, our Amy. But yeah, so it took a long time, and even then I wasn't entirely sure. You know, going into events like this, it was how honest to be about where the book came from, and I can't really talk about the book without talking about everything. And yeah, but I'm so glad, you know, that we ended up with the million copies on the shelves behind me.
Not too
the only book that I own.
I did want to clarify for our audience, Amy, who is Chris's editor and publisher and president of Henry Holt, is also the editor of Leanne Moriarty and Catherine Stockett's The Help and The Postmistress by Sarah Blake, as well as her more recent title. She's not bad at her job. I'd say she's pretty good.
Yeah, I remember when I work at the library now, and have done for a few years, and I love it. It's my favorite job. And I was having lunch during my lunch break, and I got the email that Amy wanted to buy We Begin at the End. And I thought it was a joke, because it's just it was such a strange moment. And it was so, you know, I look back on it so fondly, and she really is amazing. She is just so talented. You know, there's a level of talent. And then she picked up the book and read through it and just saw everything that bothered me about the book that wasn't right, but that I couldn't vocalize or couldn't see being too close to it. So it was, yeah, I'm in awe, basically.
This is a question I'm sure you fielded a lot, but I'd like to ask it all the same. Mm-hmm. As you pointed out, you are, and I'd like you to confirm this, you are not a 13-year-old girl. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Because I've heard rumors both ways. What compelled you to tell your story through this particular protagonist?
So firstly, I wanted to write, you know, I felt completely powerless when I was 19, and I felt like this horrible thing had happened to me and I couldn't cope with it. And I wanted to write someone that had a much worse time than me, that was much less able to cope, you know, in theory. Mm-hmm. She was so vulnerable and so lost and so alone. And that's how I felt, you know, I felt very alone at the time. And it's, I didn't think of it as writing a book, because had I done that, I might not have done it, you know, because to hang a crime story or an adult story on the shoulders of a 13-year-old girl is, if you don't get it right, you know, the book. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a difficult thing to do. So I didn't give it a whole lot of thought. I just saw her very clearly. I saw her, and she kind of just evolved, you know, over time in just through the scenes I was writing. She had no real backstory at the time. I saw this young girl that dressed in these clothes that was clearly a victim. She has a name, Duchess, you know, that made her bullied, and she just didn't stand a chance. And I felt, and I gave her a gun as well. I just saw this image, you know, that if she can fight back, then, you know, that bodes well for me. It's strange as it sounds, you know, it just really helped.
We've actually got a question here from one of the viewers regarding Duchess. Barbara Frank asks, why did you choose Duchess for her name? I understand the boy named Sue connection, but why specifically Duchess? Royalty?
So we can give away spoilers and things, can't we? Because let's not do that.
You never know.
Yeah, so Duchess, so it was, my granddad was a big Johnny Cash fan, and, you know, I listened to A Boy Named Sue, and I named her, I liked the name, and I like the names of the characters in the book, you know, because they kind of portray some of their traits. And Duchess, you know, Duchess's star is her mother, who has quite an unusual name, you know, and she named her daughter in the same kind of vein, you know, we're to be admired and looked at and things like that, you know, and that's how her mother is, and she kind of named Duchess that way. But yeah, it was just a way of making her stand out. You know, this is a girl that wants to disappear into the shadows, and nothing about her allows her to do that. You know, she just wants to be normal and blend in, and she is far from normal, and Duchess is, yeah, an outlandish name, kind of. Yeah.
We've got another question in the chat room pertaining to your character's nomenclature. Neha Patel asks, is there any connection between Boo Radley from To Kill a Mockingbird and your character, Billy Blue Radley, who both share the same last name?
There isn't, but I've been asked that question so many times now that I'm starting to think that I did it, you know, subconsciously. Yeah, on some level it was a tribute. I guess it must have popped into my head for that reason, but it just didn't. I named her so long ago, and I don't recall reading that book until after. I probably did at school, perhaps, and I've since read it a few times. But no, not on the surface. No, I didn't knowingly do it. It was a happy coincidence because, yeah, there are some similarities, you know, just in their nature.
What I found as an author is that readers are generally very generous and willing to do some of the heavy lifting for me. A number of times readers have approached me to say, oh, I thought your book was going to end this way, or I thought this had significance. And I'm thinking, no, none. But I'm saying, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I love that about it though, don't you? Because they point out things that are so much better than what I have in mind.
They make you look good.
Exactly. They do a very good job of it. But I like how subjective it is, you know, how someone can read a sentence and see something completely different to someone else. I see it working in the library. I see, you know, there's so many books and there is a perfect reader for each book. And watching them kind of find each other is lovely.
I did want to encourage our audience to ask questions in the chat room, please. And I will be asking them to Chris in turn just as we speak. For example, thank you, Ben Harris, who writes, Chris, what is your favorite genre of fiction? Mine are fantasy and science fiction.
Okay, I grew up reading a lot of crime. Dennis Lehane, big fan. AJ Finn, obviously.
Yeah. I hear he's a jerk, but yes.
But he has a lovely background.
So. He sure does, doesn't he?
He does. Yeah, so I read a lot of Stephen King when I was far too young, because my dad is a big Stephen King fan, like most people in the world, I think. Yep. And I remember reading it when I was really young, you know, because I saw he used to shelve the books on the top shelf. And to me as a kid, it was like, what can it be? It's a book. I didn't really get that books could terrify you. Yes. So I went to the library and I used to hide a copy of it inside another book or a comic book. And I read pretty much the whole book over one summer and was terrified. And that kind of got me, you know, I didn't know a book could make you feel that way. And it was very inspiring. But yeah, so a lot of crime. Pretty much anything now that catches my eye at the library I will take home. So I have a huge, like, I can only imagine how many books you get, AJ, sent to you. Yeah.
I do get some. I assume that the floodgates are just opening for you.
Yeah, they so that yeah, there's a lot, and it's so nice, isn't it? It's free books, you know, from authors that you love. You know, it's a lovely thing, but it sometimes doesn't leave you a lot of time to read widely, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, but Chris, please give a book a blurb that just says it was free. Because I would find that compelling.
I would as well. I would go for it. It's that or gripping. So you have to go with one of them. This book has been described by you and by critics aptly as a crime novel. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about that particular distinction? I know that some authors would bristle at that notion. Yeah, I really hate any kind of snobbery about any genre. You know, I can read anything, and I love that like I said, there's a book for everyone, and I love crime fiction. You know, it's one of my favorite genres to read. I think it's incredibly difficult to write and get it right, you know, because you have to combine everything into a tight plot and keep people guessing, and a lot of readers will go out of their way to guess where the book's going. You know, it's part of the fun of it. And so, you know, sometimes a book can live or die on whether they've guessed the twist. And so I think it's an incredibly difficult genre to write. But on the flip side, I'm not sure We Begin at the End is a crime book. There is a crime at the heart of it, a mystery at the heart of it. But I see it as a coming of age story. And I just set out to write a snapshot, a year in the life of Duchess and Walk, the policeman. And I'm glad I didn't have to decide where to put it, because I shelve it at the library when I work there, and I put it everywhere. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, so people can't get away from it. So yeah,
that's very canny. One of my sisters goes into bookstores, usually Barnes and Noble, and will find a copy of my book and hide it, which is pretty nasty, actually. All right, we've got another question. Yeah. I'm sorry, go on.
No, when you're that successful, your sister will try.
It still hurts, Chris. Yeah. It still hurts. This is from Aisha Cloud, telling us that D. Thomas says, what was your hardest scene to write in We Begin at the End? And Joanne Rizza asks, do you think each character gets the ending they deserve?
That's a good question. I'll answer, the first one. The hardest scene to write, if you've read the book, you will know it's at the end. I won't ruin anything, but it's Duchess and her brother together. Yes. And I knew at the beginning of the book, Duchess's mother tells her that selfless acts are what make a good person, basically. And it's one of the few things that Duchess hangs on to. And so she spends the book looking for her perfect selfless act, and it was about her finding that act, you know, that would come at a great personal cost to her. And I always knew where the book was going. You know, one of the few things I knew was how it was going to end. How I'd get there was up for grabs. You know, it changed every time I sat down to write the story. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was really difficult to write. And as for whether the characters get the endings they deserve, I don't think so. I don't think life works like that. Yeah. I think, yeah, it just, I don't think they do. What do you think? Do you think they do?
In your book, no, I don't. But that to me enhances its credibility. It does not feel tidy. I don't feel that justice is meted out and apportioned precisely. That's life. It's ragged. It's unfair.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we're just glimpsing, you know, there's a lot of, you know, are they good? Are they bad? And I think if you spend enough time with anyone, they shouldn't be any one thing. You know, I think it's very rare that someone is all bad or all good, or, you know, and that's just what I wanted to show in the book. You know, we're just having a quick look at their lives, and yeah, no, definitely they don't get the endings they deserve, because Duchess would get more, I think.
Yes.
You know, yeah.
So the questions are actually coming in thick and fast. Okay. Tina Reed asks, what books influenced you growing up? We've touched on that a bit, but I ask because your book reminded me of so many of my faves, like A Prayer for Owen Meany, one of my faves as well, To Kill a Mockingbird, A Tree Goes in Brooklyn. And I hear you mentioning King now. So we're playing catch up a bit, but was there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, very similar. A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. Love that book. Cormac McCarthy, I'm a massive fan of. The Road is a book that reads differently every time I read it, which is the mark of a kind of classic. To Kill a Mockingbird, definitely. The Revenant, I loved. God, there's just so many. Margaret Atwood, massive fan. Yeah, but for this book, it's difficult because I started writing it so long ago and so long, you know, before I was a proper reader, you know, when I was, so I guess, yeah, everything I've read since has kind of come into it. But yeah, those ones, for the most part, I would say, you know, if I had to pick some, definitely those, definitely Cormac McCarthy.
Let me return to this. Donna O'Meara asks, does Duchess still have a story to tell without giving away the ending? Any thoughts of continuing her story?
I've given that a lot of thought as well, because
really,
people have asked me about it, you know, and what, because it's quite a difficult ending to read, and yeah, and some people reach out, which I take as a, you know, a massive compliment that they want to know what happens next. But it was only ever designed to be a look at her life, you know, over 1 year. We pick up a difficult point and leave her hopefully in a better place. You know, I certainly think in a better place. But I haven't given it, you know, if I had something really credible to do with the characters and didn't feel like, you know, just because it's been well received or something, I should write another one. I would never do that. No.
I've been asked this question about my novel, The Woman in the Window.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Well, unlike yours, that is not literary fiction. It is straight up fiction. Mm-hmm. That said, I am asked if I would continue this particular character story, and my answer is simply a flat no. I feel that story has been told. There would be no organic reason. Were there an organic reason? Maybe. I assume that's what you're saying.
Yeah, I think so. But you do get attached. Like, did you get attached to Anna when you were writing? You do kind of.
By the time, no, I did actually. She was a lot like me. She struggled with mental illness, as have I, since age 20. She had a much nicer house than I do. Actually, no, I don't have that much in common with Anna. No. I was very attached to her, but the story is told. I moved on.
Yeah, that's how I feel. Yeah, she Duchess was such a big part of my life, but yeah, I don't know.
Okay, next question. Gosh, what an attentive audience. You guys are great. Jennifer Hughes asks, this is a good question. What does the title mean to you?
I love the title. I don't generally get to name the books. And I didn't call this book anything. There's a kind of prologue at the start, and I called that We Begin at the End, and my editor pulled it out because it was written a few times in the text, but it's very much a kind of commentary on where the characters are. You know, the book begins with the tragic death of a child, and then we pick up 30 years later and find out that none of the characters have moved on from this event, and it casts such a huge shadow, and it's something I can relate to, you know, something happening in the past that you can't really get away from no matter how hard you try. So you either have to find a way to live with it, or, you know, to do something about it. And that's what it means to these characters. Walk, you have the policeman in the town, and he still carries his childhood nickname, and he still feels 15, and he's still constantly looking back over his shoulder because the future is terrifying. And we do, you know, I think at the start, it's an apt title. You know, we do begin at the end for these characters, but hopefully by the end of the story, they've moved on from it.
One of the elements of this jacket that I like best, in fact, hands down the element I like best, is the size of the typeface, which bespeaks real confidence.
Yeah.
You can read it across a shop or a library, as I'm sure you've had time to appreciate.
Yes.
But this book is emphatic about its titular statement. I admire that. I thought, well played, Henry Holt. And it's very similar in the UK, I believe.
It is, yeah, it's very similar. It's a different font, but it was... I thought it was a bold choice for a title as well, because it doesn't give you too much. It's not overtly anything, you know, it's not particularly a crime title. It's, I find it really interesting. I think.
So I was just about to say, this is serendipitous. Kathy Manning Kane asks, did you come up with a title, or your editor or publisher?
We'd probably disagree on that. We both claim it. No, I did. I put it as the title for the prologue. So it was kind of there, and she suggested it, and I'm very glad she did. So, yeah.
Okay. Now we have a question from Arlene C. Pesigan, who asks, will you continue to be working in the library while you do promotional interviews and related events regarding We Begin at the End? How do your coworkers react? Do they hide the book?
So I will continue working at the library, and this is my 17th event tonight, and I have a load, probably the same number again coming up. So it's been I've dropped my hours down to 1.5 days a week, something like that, just because I'm tired. There's a time difference, and I need to write another book, and I still trade in the stock market, so I have 3 jobs and a baby, and we've been living on a building site for a year because of COVID. So it's been, it's been an intense time, but I will. My co-workers are, they're lovely. They keep me grounded by feigning indifference when the New York Times celebrity best-selling author comes into the library. They don't pay me the respect that I'm due. That was.
This again, good timing. Frankie Pellet asks, how does it feel to be a New York Times best-selling author? And I would just like to tack a question onto that. Your first 2 books, while very well received in the UK, are not yet available in the US. So that was the market you hadn't had the opportunity to crack. Right. Here you are, effectively a debut novelist as far as America is concerned. And boom, 3 weeks running on the New York Times bestseller list. How does that feel?
It's something I never thought that I would achieve. I thought I'll keep trading in the stock market. I'll keep working at the library. I will write books, but I'm okay with nothing ever really happening. They might find a small readership that like them, but for me, it's a vocation, and it's something I absolutely need in my life, to stay grounded. So I would write even if no one ever read anything that I'd written. So to say it's a pleasant byproduct, side effect, or whatever does it a disservice. It's mind-blowing, it's staggering, it's something that I will never get over, and it's one thing to write a book that people like, and it's another thing to get it into the hands of so many people.
Yes.
And Henry Holt, Amy and Catherine and Pat and everyone there, they're just so talented, and they're so good at what they do, and I have them to thank entirely. But yeah, how did you feel when you sold millions of copies? And it must have been.
No, it was. It was very exciting. But bear in mind that I've spent 10 years working in publishing, which isn't to say that I was anything less than thrilled to have enjoyed that kind of exposure and success, which I credit solely to my publishing team, including my agents. But I knew, for example, that at about 5:15 p.m. on Wednesdays, the New York Times bestseller list is smuggled to editors throughout the industry. So I was waiting for that. How were you informed? Who told you? Where were you?
It was so annoying because my daughter, we have a 9-month-old daughter, and she's teething. She began teething on publication day. 2 teeth just appeared as a present. A present for me. So I was in her bedroom, her nursery, trying to get her to sleep, and she was screaming. So I missed the call from Amy telling me that I was I know. So then I
lord that over your daughter for the rest of her life.
I really will. I was, but so on the one hand, I was very sad to miss the call, but I checked my email and saw it arrive, and it was kind of one of those moments that you'll never forget. And every week the email, so 4 weeks now, the email's still coming saying we're still on the list, and it's just amazing, isn't it? It's really, because I'm so far away, and I've written this story about places that I've never been to, and American readers, so they're just so kind, and they've been so lovely and accepting and just lovely, and I am grateful, very grateful.
That's very humble, and I'm pleased to hear it. Okay, so Humaira Fatma asks, I'm a librarian myself, and this is amazing to know that you are a librarian as well. What is your most memorable librarian moment, and will it make it into a future book?
There's been so many. I thought the library was like this calm, quiet place. But, it's mad. It is my best So I do this thing called Baby Rhyme Time every Tuesday, which is where we stand, me and someone else, another library worker, stand in a group of probably 50 toddlers and babies, and we do nursery rhymes and things like that, and they try and climb on us and scale us, and that is I just love it. But we haven't been able to do it because of COVID, but it's just brilliant, you know, seeing so many, because they start at that age, you know, readers start really young, and and you watch the kids kind of grow up and move through the levels and through the sections in the library. And there's just, and we do a thing called the Summer Reading Challenge, which is where all the kids during the summer holidays come in and read books and tick off how many books, and they sit down and tell us about the book. That's a part of it, and it gets them used to talking, you know, to people about books and stories. And it's just, I just love it. It's just wonderful.
Next question from Judy Cedarbaum Ross. From start to finish, how many years did it take to write?
19.
That makes me feel better about my second book, by the way. So thank you for that.
How are you doing with the second book? Because I wanted to ask you. Is it comfortable? You know, are you in a comfortable place because you've achieved so much, or does it add to the pressure?
Oh gosh, you make me feel better about myself. I don't feel any particular mantle of expectations. If the book does better than The Woman in the Window, awesome. If it doesn't, and second books routinely fall short, okay, that's fine.
Second album,
I have been, yes, exactly. I have been somewhat preoccupied with the film release of The Woman in the Window, which was produced at I wouldn't say an unfortunate, an interesting time in Hollywood history, colliding with a pandemic. Yes. You've got cinemas closing and the distribution model being devastated by Netflix. So this movie went from Fox to Disney, which had bought Fox, to Netflix, which had bought the film from Disney. I'm very happy about that, simply because I don't see readers or viewers, for that matter, returning to cinemas en masse anytime soon. No. And I would rather have 200 million prospective viewers. But that's been a lot. So I would not be surprised if you're publishing your seventh book by the time I finish my second. Please don't. That would make me feel really bad.
There's no danger of that.
Next question from Arlene C. Pasigan. How do you cope when you write dark moments in this book? How deeply do you inhabit your characters, and how do you transition from your story to real life?
That's a really good question, and it's something I'm terrible at. It's my wife sees writing as like an addiction, like another addiction, because I needed another one. And so I will be lying in bed at night, and I will have written a difficult scene with Duchess, and I won't be able to sleep, and I will get up at 2 or 3 in the morning, go back to my desk because something doesn't feel right, you know, a paragraph or a sentence doesn't feel right, and I'll try and work out why, and I won't be able to relax, and I'll be kind of distant, you know, when you're there but not really there. Yep. You know, like, and I feel terribly guilty about it with my kids, and I feel like I'm not engaged in a way I should be, and it's difficult, but it helps writing some humor and some. So Duchess has a smart mouth, and there's a character called Thomas Noble that chooses to pursue her, and it's a terrible decision because she couldn't be less interested, and I enjoyed writing those scenes. So it was like coming up for air, you know, when you're kind of down writing something difficult, it was coming up for air, writing some humor and reminding readers that she's 13, you know, and although she's had no real childhood, she's still a child, and she is getting ready for her first prom. So yeah, so that helps massively. But it's something, each time I write a book, I'm hoping it will get easier, but it doesn't. I think I should be a better writer, so I should know what to do, you know, and I haven't done any courses or anything, and I'm wondering if they help, you know, like a creative writing course, if they teach you something that I don't know.
Right.
But, yeah.
We've got what appears to be one final question from Valerie Hartman. I find it surprising you do not become attached to your characters. How do you do that after spending so much time with them? Some characters in the book I stay with forever.
I absolutely am attached to them. They are, you know, I've lived with Duchess for a bulk of my life, you know, half my life. I find it very hard to let go, and I found it hard to, you know, when you sign off on the final proofread, and I didn't want to do it, and I didn't want to hand it over to someone else, and I didn't really want it to be published. And I went through all those things, you know, where you email your editor and say, I don't really want to do this one anymore, I'm going to write something else. And yeah, I'm incredibly attached, and I'll carry them with me for definitely for the rest of my life.
I've got a question for you before we go. Do you read your own reviews? Do you read your Amazon or Goodreads reviews, or do you steer clear?
So the first couple I will read, and if someone tags me into a review, I will read it. Other than that, I try not to. It's like book sales and things. I try not to. It's out of my hands. You know, all I need to know is that I've done my absolute best. You know, and that's why I get up in the middle of the night and change sentences and things, because I feel hugely grateful to Amy and everyone, and everyone that chooses to spend their money on the book. You know, I owe them the absolute best that I've got, and if it's not, then I won't send it, you know, to my editor, and I won't sign off on it. And so I'm okay with it, and I know it's subjective, and I know everyone won't enjoy it, but that's okay with me as long as I've given it everything. So how about you?
I don't know. I never ever read any of that. I read the first couple of reviews that were published for The Woman in the Window simply because it was a novel experience, but I didn't want to find myself unduly influenced or impressed one way or the other. And also, as I'm perhaps overfond of saying, you know, whether you like it or hate it, I've written the damn book. That's what it is. Exactly. I'm not going to edit it. So
it's perfectly put. Yeah.
It's poetry. Oh, yes. Okay. So we would like to remind you that we begin at the end, which was the March, or is, but only barely. Yep. The March book club pick for Barnes & Noble is going to be available at Barnes & Noble stores and 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on bn.com. So Chris Whitaker, we begin at the end. Thank you so much. My dog is asleep. That could be read either way. So
thank you very much. You know, I've been looking forward to this ever since I knew that you were going to do it. And thank you. I'm so grateful.
Absolutely my pleasure. And congratulations. And bring on more weeks on the bestseller list.
Fingers crossed.
All right. Bye, Chris.
See ya.
Bye-bye.